Welcome back to Connecting Conversation with your host. I am Evelkah Powell.
And I'm Carla.
And today we are actually talking about a really interesting topic. And I think we've had a series of conversations like this with some guests and with other people, but also even with ourselves. So I think it'll be really great for us to dig a little bit deeper in all things finance because over here we like money too.
It's
Money.
so interesting, right? Because I feel like, considering we belong to the British Isles, it's not
Mm,
always a comfortable topic to talk about. Let's talk about
no.
money. But yeah, I think post COVID, we've had and seen
Mm,
so many people having to rethink career paths, kind of make some real
mm,
shifts about, okay, what am I doing with my time, and where
yeah.
work is actually consuming so much of it. But I want that financial freedom. How
Yeah.
do I do that? So we've seen, I think, like a bit of a wave of kind of like a mind shift, and people are so much more open to
Mm,
the conversation of entrepreneurship. How can I find financial freedom? What do I need to
yeah.
do?
Yeah.
And so many people have taken those steps. And I think one of the things that I really like to talk about is like, where do we get all of these ideas from? So my question to you
Oh,
first
here
is,
we go.
can you remember can you remember your first job?
I can very vividly. Very, very vividly. My first job was at Costa Coffee,
I love it.
barista.
That's
Um,
quite posh for a first job. People have had worse first jobs.
that's true.
It's quite trendy. Oh yeah, barista, oat milk.
Making my little cappuccino with the froth on
See,
top.
like that's like trendy living. I mean, okay.
Yeah, it was great fun. I loved it. And I think having that as my first job was very eye opening because not only was I taught about money, but also how to manage my money, how to deal with real life people.
Mm.
Because when you're at school with people who, the same age, you don't really have the conflict or you get to choose your circles that you're in, but when you're in a workplace it's just like these other people you work with, you can't really pick and choose these people. So it was a whole learning curve, but it was definitely my favorite first job. And I think just thinking back, I had to think back like, how much did I earn? I can't really remember, but I think at the time it was something like, I want to say anything between £8 to £10 an hour.
That was wild. That was definitely not what I was getting paid in my first job. But truth be told, your first job is in a very different era than my first job.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Oh god.
But, I think even handling my first paycheck, that was interesting because, again, I don't remember what my first paycheck was. I would love to know what it is. But it was just interesting on how my attitude and my mindset was towards money because it was my first time. Oh, I got the freedom to do all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things, buy my little, you know, toiletries, my makeup, I can go out with friends without having to ask my mom. I felt like a real like woman adult. I was just like, mommy can't tell me what to do now
Wow.
because I can pay my way. So I think that, liberatory sense of freedom really
Mm,
came in. But one thing when I think back, my mom used to always say, save your money, save your money. And I'm just like, okay, cool. So you put aside some money and then you
mm,
spend the rest. But if there was a conversation around, okay, let's invest your money because we can turn this £200 into, £2,000 or £20,000, I'd have been like, great. But those weren't the conversations that
mm.
my mom had with me. And I think maybe if I thought about how money multiplied at that age, maybe I would, you know, probably I would be retired right now. I'll be like sitting on a beach, like with some mocktails, sea, sand, sun, all of that stuff. I wouldn't be here in this country, that's for sure. Anyways, but going back to the point, it wasn't a conversation. It was just like, you need to save your money, you need to go to school, save your money, go to school, save your money. That was literally the double s's that I heard all throughout my childhood. But I think if I had the conversation around, okay, here is how we can invest your money, here is where we can put your money, here is what we can do, then I probably would have had a different attitude at that age and been able to kind of maybe advance more my financial goals as I grew up. But and I sometimes think, was it because she was not taught that either? Was it because that wasn't a mindset, coming from the Caribbean to the UK, and how that, the culture difference and how my mom was raised, like, she can only do with what she knew. So I wonder, even going back from a culture point of view, like, it wasn't something that I grew up in the Black Caribbean culture talking about investing, because it just wasn't a thing then. And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that for all Black Caribbean people, but in the family that I was raised in and the community I was raised in, it was less so about investing and more so about saving. But that's just kind of my starting point. What about you?
I
What
love
was
how
your first job?
oh, my first job
Let's hear it.
was at Waitrose,
Oh,
cashier.
that is very
Because
posh.
I'm classy. Thank you.
Very posh.
Yeah, and I think a lot like you, I experienced that sense of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have my own money. And so it was like £100 a month back then. But like we're talking about, this is a long time ago. That money
How
went
long?
far. Don't get on my wrong side right now, because it's not gonna be pretty. Anyway, let's just put, it was like that money went a long way for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, because I was getting pocket money at the time, maybe like £5 or
Mm,
something like that every
mm.
2 weeks. And that was like, it was literally like you could buy maybe like lip gloss or something like that. But that's what I was getting. So getting this money for the first time at
Yeah.
the age of 16, I was like, oh my gosh, I have this independence. I can look at the magazines and get them anytime I want to. I could
Yeah.
get, bits of makeup that I've always wanted. Like,
Mm,
just, like you said, that concept was there. What
mm,
was interesting that you mentioned about culturally, about how it is that money or finances was kind of
mhm.
discussed at home. Like, I definitely know some distinctive cultural concepts too, some quite
Yeah.
similar to yours, and maybe
Mhm.
one that's kind of a little different. So
Mhm.
in my family's culture, from where they come from, I think traditionally what they would do, or the expectation is that at your first job,
Yeah.
and if you're living in obviously under your parents' roof,
Yeah.
you would give your first whole salary to your parents. That hurt me so much. But I understood the value of what they were teaching me,
Mm,
because for them, they were like, we're taking the money and we are supposed to save it for you. So
yeah.
they're building towards saving on my behalf for either,
Mm,
I don't know, a wedding, or saving
okay.
for like a deposit for a house or
Yeah.
something to
Yeah.
move on. Obviously, life looks very different now, but back then that was still kind of like how they navigated
Yeah.
life with finances. And that was a generation that, my parents' generation, that's what they did with their parents too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like you, we'd never heard much about the language of investing. It was always
Yeah.
about save, save, save. Work hard
Mm,
at school, because that'll
yeah.
give you options for career paths. But like,
Yeah.
you're going to be at school and you're going to get into debt, because you're hopefully going to get to a job that's going to pay you a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
We've learned subsequently that that just hasn't been enough for anybody. And super
Mm,
professional people that are highly qualified, are not accessing the kind of financial freedom that you'd
yeah.
think kind of was a bit of a dream that may have been sold
Yeah.
to them, but that was a whole cultural perception
Mm.
of it, right?
And a generational
A
perspective.
generational
Yeah.
perception. And it's just
Mm.
interesting to hear what you're saying. And now we're looking at people thinking like, but my time is valuable. I have a
Yeah.
right to actually move out from that expectation
Yeah.
and find ways that I can work smart. It doesn't mean I'm working less hard,
Yeah.
but work smart, so like my life is not drained by this thing.
Mm.
And I've heard about it described in this really kind of negative way, but it's like, you live, you work, you pay taxes, you die.
Hmm.
That's just not enough
Not
for
for
us
me.
anymore. No, it's not. And I think, that's a hard thing to consider. And
Mm.
and also like lifestyle, now we're looking at the values of property. Now, what
Yeah.
young person has the financial mobility to just buy a house on their own
Yeah.
like that? Because we're looking at, it's 500,000 for like just a standard size
Yeah.
small spaced home, depending on obviously where you are in
Yeah.
location.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know things can be, depending on where you're, south, north, very different kind of like price ranges. But like,
Yeah.
we're in the southeast, this is the kind of life that we're expected to do, and
100.
professionals can't do that.
Yeah. No, it's so true, and I think, um, it's quite sad. It's honestly quite sad, because I was, I'm in my late 20s. and
What does that even mean?
and I'm looking to buy a house. Well, albeit I don't know whether I want to do it in this country or not,
Okay.
because who knows. But I remember when I moved out of my mom's house on my own, I looked into, maybe I'll just buy a house on my own.
Mm.
And the funds that I will need to buy a house in the area that I wanted to buy a house in was just like double. And I'm just like, I can't do this on my own. And if so, I would have to do it with, a friend or partner. And I'm just like, well, what if I don't want to do that? That's limiting my choices. So, you kind of, this whole idea of, like you said, going to school, doing well, working, for me, I've now realized, okay, going to school was great and I'm never knocking that. Like, education is still very important to this day, but is it the be all and end all to get you to financial freedom?
Mm.
Absolutely not. And I think, like, my mom's generations, my nan generation, my nan used to always say, like, go school, learn your lesson, all of this stuff. How did you do well in school? Make sure you do well in school. Don't study any boys and all of this stuff.
Don't study any boys.
That was a Karen.
I'm taking that line. Don't study any boys.
That
Okay.
was the language. But, all that's to say is, it was so fixated on education and less so about, okay, how can I
Mhm.
help you financially when you are of age to take care of yourself, what position you want to be in, what investment you'll have, how can I invest in you as a young child in order to help to make sure that your life is, you know not filled with burden or debt. And I think back home, that wasn't the focus. It was just like, go to school, get an education, and you'll be good. Now, not happening. Like, you could go to school, you can have a good education, but that doesn't mean I'll be able to fulfill the goals that I really want to fulfill in life, especially from a financial point of view.
I think that's so interesting to hear that. And I look back, and even as you recounting the story of your grandma and what she said, I feel like what our parents or our relatives or our elders instilled in us is that's they gave us the best of what they knew.
Yeah.
It really shows you like this is
Yeah.
not a particular blame thing, but clearly there has been a
Mm,
a generated societal perspective
yeah.
about how people should be prioritizing finance and how
Mm,
should they even have the right to start considering financial independence and what that looks
mm,
like. And I think it's hard to break the cycle from that. I
yeah.
think we're living in the age of technology where we are constantly surrounded by, media and
Yeah.
social media. That's I get snippets all the time from some really great entrepreneurs who also
Mm,
started from a background of maybe that wasn't quite the tools that they grew up with. But
yeah.
because you're in an era with technology and the access to information about, there's a different mindset you could
Mindset.
have. There's a
Yeah.
different culture you can engage in. There's a
Yeah.
way in which you can adapt your life to look in a different way. The
Mm,
opportunities and exposure to that is so
mm,
much wider now.
yeah.
But in saying that, it's also like, how do you break the cycle? Because culture can be super entrenching.
Oh,
Like
100%.
when you've been in an environment where all you've seen is like, people living from paycheck to
Mm,
paycheck, that debt is normal.
mm,
And that's actually really encouraging. It's
yeah.
encouraged as a culture, like stay in debt. Like,
Yeah.
but actually you limit your choices. You're not free.
Yeah.
How do you like, how do you break out of that? Because we're now all, kind of in the position of access to this,
Yeah. Yeah.
different alternative
Yeah.
information and ways of
Yeah.
thinking. But how do we break that cycle? Because if
Mm,
that's all we know and all we've seen, actually venturing out into something new can be quite daunting and can
yeah.
sometimes create a lot of obstacle in actually taking that step.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think social media also skewed our mindset around finance as
Okay.
well, and gives and presents a picture like, if you do it this way, then you will
Right.
have
Yeah.
this.
It isn't.
And
It isn't entirely true either.
that isn't entirely true. No. So I think we just need to be cautious of what our intake in terms of what we see on social media, in terms of, the language, because I know there was stuff about, for a while, and it still goes on,
Mhm,
around
mhm.
stocks and crypto, and getting
Right.
people to,
Right. Yeah.
people messaging people on social media saying, oh, work with me and I'll help you make this kind of money. And it's just like, it's so tempting, because people are living really in a society where debt is really, really high, and a lot of people are struggling with it, and to the point where this is really dark and really sad to say, but it's leading people to, take their own lives because
Yeah.
they can't manage. And it's just
Hmm.
like, why do we have to wait for it to get to that point? How can we find ways and methods and strategies to educate ourselves and surround ourselves with the right mindset, the
Hmm. Hmm.
abundant mindset in, okay, I may not have this now, but what can I do to work towards it?
Hmm. Hmm.
And, this is really controversial, and I don't know if I should talk about it, but I am going to anyway because this is a safe space, guys. and
What
I,
does that mean?
and Carla has no idea what I'm about to ask or
Help,
say.
please. Thank you.
So apologies in advance. But this kind of goes into more of a faith led aspect, and there are conversations I have been having with some people who talk about how I feel so afraid to say this, but I think it'll, a lot of people will find value or maybe relate to this in some way. But that from a faith point of view, there is this belief that people are cursed, certain families are cursed
Oh,
to
wow.
live in debt. And so for generation upon generation, they're going through this cycle
So
of
crazy.
debt. And, I was speaking to someone and they were just like, the reason I'm struggling so much is because I know someone has put a curse on my family and
Interesting.
we can't get out. Like, I can't get out of it. And no matter how much I try, I did everything everyone said I should do. And I still feel like I'm stuck in this cycle. And I was just like, that is very, very deep. I don't know if you've heard of any conversations or anything like that.
I'll be very honest. I've heard like in terms of like you said, a generational curse in terms of
Mm,
like trying to break things like poverty in the
yeah.
family. And if that's something, and I think we spoke about this earlier,
Hmm.
culture can sometimes look like that. If the
Yeah.
culture at home that was taught to my parents and taught to their parents and taught to that
Mm,
parents,
mm,
unless someone breaks the cycle or they're exposed to something alternative, it just is a pattern of
yeah.
repeated behavior.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of what you're saying,
Yeah.
but there are other elements where on some communities they even see that there is almost like a supernatural
Yeah.
target as well, and that's a whole other
That
conversation.
that's a whole. But
But
it
if
was
that's
just,
how, what people are really experiencing, that's another dimension of like just a loss of freedom, which I'd feel really
yeah.
sad
Yeah.
that people are going
But
through
also,
that.
I also think, like, I'm not saying that people don't go through it, but even so, what can you do? What control that you can take back in
Mm,
order to break free? Because we all can pull ourselves out of debt, financial struggles. Like, it's not impossible. And I think because we live in a society where we feel like there is no way out, we always have to pay taxes. We all has, there's always a bill to pay.
mm,
But I think it's a lot to do with our mindset. Like, are we sitting within a lack mindset where everything we do is like lacking, or are we sitting in a mindset of abundance, like, okay, this is what I have, but this is what I can do to allow me to get to X, Y, and Z and
mm,
financial freedom? And a lot of people, and they talk about it a lot, is those get rich schemes. And you
mm,
know that is not the way forward, because the faster you get it, the quicker it can be
mm,
taken away
mm,
from you.
mhm, mhm,
So I think a lot of this stuff, when we talk about financial freedom, it's just not the actual physical tangible aspect of money, but it's about our mindset.
mhm, mhm.
I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's I feel like more and more as I'm on this journey myself with entrepreneurship, I've like really I'm one of those people that we referred to earlier about did the pivot during, lockdown, shifted out of my original career path
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
was in education and found like how do I make my skills work for me in a way that is more firstly impactful, which is
Yeah.
a huge driver of myself,
Hmm.
and also to see the benefits of it in a way that gives me the financial freedom because
Yeah.
what is the point of for me personally
Yeah.
working so hard and not being able to just see the fruit of labor? I feel like
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
there is a deserved balance with that.
Mm.
And after a while in my last role, I was struggling to reconcile like this doesn't make sense, this is taking so much of my
Yeah.
intellectual energy, it's taking so much of my emotional energy, like on all
Mm.
accounts cerebral bank accounts are having major withdrawal. It was really
Yeah.
tough, and at the end of the day I didn't even have the ability to like, yes, as a the role that I was doing was a public service servant. How do I can't just go and buy a house. I
Mm.
can't have a space of my own. I will
Mm.
be trapped in a cycle of it's either one or the other, and that will be
Wow.
debt induced as well. And a
Yeah.
lot of my
Yeah.
colleagues were in that position. That's normally how they lived, and like, but this can't be it. How do I get free from that? But
Yeah.
right now, where I was, and even when I was in those roles, I was still living with my parents, which for people in their 30s has not been uncommon for some time,
Yeah. Yeah.
because of the way that living costs as well, and
Yeah.
salaries haven't risen, and depending on which sector you're in, like, that wasn't showing promise that you just have the financial freedom to go and
Yeah.
acquire your own
Yeah.
spaces
Yeah. Yeah.
always. So, or unless you had help or there was some inheritance available, but again, that's a lot less common. They're
Yeah.
not. I think for me, what I've learned in all of that is, and coming to this point now, is like, okay, so maybe that education wasn't culturally available to
Mm.
me. And I guess I'd pose this question to you as well. It's like, now I know that something else can be different.
Mhm.
How
Mhm.
do I want this to translate, hopefully, to the generation that comes
Yeah.
after me? You know, I'm hoping to have a family one day of my own. Like, what will I teach them? What does that
Yeah.
look like? Thankfully, my husband is way more in tune with like business and entrepreneurship. Thank God for that,
Your
because
kid will be will be investing at the age of 2.
honestly, and I'm grateful for that skill set being in my life. That is an
Mm.
exposure to a person that has not only lived it, but has been in practice of it. So
Yeah.
becoming, joining a new family like that, away from the family I've come from,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
seeing it put in practice, and now learning day by day what it looks like to have that mindset, and it
Yeah.
growing and getting, I think, more courageous, because that's daunting if that's all you know. And that's certainly how I
Mm.
felt about it. Is like, how am I going to teach my kids about this
Yeah.
afterwards? What do I want for them?
Mm.
Even from that first job. And that's why I asked that
Yeah.
at the start of this conversation, is it worth us actually introducing some of these concepts a lot early on, in fun,
100%.
in games,
Yeah.
in, I know it doesn't always have to be serious, but get them into the mindset of, I think what you said, also abundance, and to be
Mm.
generous people.
Yes.
If you have a scarcity mindset and you're going to be stingy,
Mm.
you might be someone that is able to accrue a lot of money, but
Yeah.
you might also lack a lot of things that comes along with that kind of
Yeah.
attitude. You might be quite lonely, because that kind of behavior alienates people from you.
100%.
And quite frankly, people are the currency, because it's through connections with people that
Yeah.
opportunities come. It's connections with people that
Mm.
actually you find the abundance, because they
100%.
show you new ways of thinking, they show you new ways of
Mhm.
doors and
Mhm.
opportunities that you'll never get on your
Yeah.
own.
They said your network is your net worth. So
I best get working on that big time then, because I want a
we
big
have,
network.
we have.
And
Don't you
is
worry.
but in saying that, isn't that great? Like,
Yeah.
that's a new thing that has kind of just shifted in the last few
Mm.
years,
Yeah.
which is actually, and seeing how much that has
Mm.
impacted and grown in such a short space of time is encouraging. And I hope that anyone that comes across this conversation can be encouraged that actually I could do that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because yes, my start might have been different and it wasn't always abundant, but now that I've learned what these principles are and I
Yeah.
have a right to take hold of them, just take the steps.
Yeah. You just need the foundations, don't you? Like once you've laid the foundations and you're able to build from that, because if you don't have that foundation of understanding of minds, abundant mindset, then there's
Mm,
nothing for it to stand on when you do eventually venture out into like investing, because it will literally just fall through because you won't know how to manage it. You wouldn't
mm,
know, you know, what bricks to put in what places or where to position certain things.
mm.
So I think we just have to make sure that the foundation is there, and not be afraid to talk about money. Like for some reason, our society, we are very hush hush when it comes to how much we earn, or
Or just putting our
uh
success on display
yeah,
in
like
like
we're
any way.
very like, oh no, I shouldn't really talk about that, or I shouldn't really talk about how much I charge clients for this,
Do
because
you think that's to do with people's fear about, if people know, then I'll be taken advantage of? Or is it a fear of, if people know, people will treat me differently?
I think it's a bit of
Interesting.
both actually, because I think one, we think money should be this sacred thing that we should keep to ourselves, and it's very personal and therefore no one else should know. And so we don't want certain people to know, because we don't want them to think we have like loads of cash in the bank, and we don't want people to beg, and all that stuff. But at the same time, I wonder if it's because our relationship is money is the same way in which we keep it so sacred, and that's
Mm,
why we can't actually move forward and earn big money, because we think that it's something that should be hidden away. And that practical sense of hiding and keeping it away, you're literally hiding your value, you're hiding your worth, you're hiding your ability to partake in, certain spaces and certain like certain activities. And I think you just basically alienate yourself from all of that. So I think it's a bit of both, and I think it's this idea of money should it is so personal, but essentially nothing is hidden.
I think it's so interesting that you use the word sacred about money, because I think that can have like so many
Mm,
connotations. I think from a religious view, that's quite precious, and there's
mm,
nothing wrong with having value there.
yeah.
But in terms of like the hiddenness of it, but
Mm,
also like the way that we're talking about how that is expressed in behavior
yeah.
is not sacred in a good way.
No,
That doesn't sound. Do you know what I mean?
it doesn't benefit you.
It sounds like, and again, I wonder if like, would I want my sacredness associated with that kind of behavior of sacredness as
Mm,
money? Do you know what I mean?
mm,
And I think that's interesting to think about it that way. But I feel like when people are, it's the negative connotation,
yeah,
like it's the stingy element or the
yeah,
scarcity element, like that is something that we probably need to address, and like, why is that there? And I
yeah.
think that there is, we could go into it, but at high level, people talk about there is an ancient system that we have in the UK
Mm,
of class system and what was
mm,
and wasn't acceptable. People know your place.
yeah,
And
yeah,
have we actually lost some of those elements, because that has infiltrated our perceptions of how we find opportunities to become financially free? Like, no, this is
yeah,
my place in society, and proudly I will occupy it, even if it puts me at a disadvantaged
yeah,
position.
yeah,
And my family, it doesn't give me offering for more, but that's okay, because
yeah.
society tells me that that was always my social place.
Institution is doing,
Mm, mm,
like what's the system that we're living in. Because yes, the reason some people have access to more funding, more money, more inheritance and wealth is because they are part of a particular community, a particular class system that allows for that, and
mm, mm.
that's given them that head start in comparison to others. So there is a very like inequitable, kind of
Dynamic.
dynamic
Yeah.
that we are experiencing from a societal level. So that's not for us to take that for granted, because that is still and very much real in today's society. But when we look at our own relationship with money, how are we viewing that? How are
Mm,
we what's our mindset around it? Like, what's our relationship with money? And I remember I was speaking to someone a while ago, and they were just like, you have to treat money as if like you're in a partnership with someone. Like, if you want money to come to you, you have to treat money as if money is the best thing there. You have to make sure that you are, you are having positive outlooks, you're
mm,
having
mm,
positive like affirmations, you are treating money in the same way you want that money to come back and treat you.
mm, mm.
So if you're out there spending like mad, money will be like, well, you don't want me, so I won't come back.
Interesting.
And someone
Interesting.
taught me about that mindset, and I'm just like, so now I have to treat money as if it's my husband. Okay, we'll do that. He will stay. That's for sure.
But it's like a
But
team
it
process
it
there.
is. It
Yeah.
is. But that's how someone said that's how they view money, because the more you take care of something, the more you get out of it.
Mm,
And that applies to anything. But in terms of money mindset, the more you put out there, the more you invest, the more you're generous, the more of that you'll get back 10 times more. And it is quite biblical as well.
mm.
So that's another aspect of how we can change our mindset. Just treat it like your partner, you'll be fine.
I couldn't think of a better way to end this conversation, especially as I think in our series of exploring that over this
Mm,
of this kind of topic over this year. It'll be really good to dig deeper. But
mm.
yes, I love it. I think we've whet their appetites just a little bit.
Giving
So
you a little bit of
just a
a
little bit, just a bit.
taste
But
of
yes, until
mine.
next time,
Until next,
Evelka.
it's been great. It's been so great. But no, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your engagement. Continue to like, share, comment, and let us know about your relationship with money. Do you like money as much as we do? Let us know that.
Bye.
Thank you.